Sometimes in a Christian journey, as we understand our freedoms, as we understand the privileges that we have, we can get carried away. We can get carried away not because we want to intentionally dishonor the Lord, but sometimes we feel that our place and our position in Him gives us liberties and freedoms and rights and things that we do not think through carefully about. We do not appreciate. My mind goes back to what was happening in the church in Corinth. Corinth was a horrible place in many respects. To Corinthianize was to be immoral. And that crept in the church in a bad way. Paul and those who told him about it were lamenting that there was sexual immorality in the church in a way that the pagans would not tolerate. What was it? That a man was sleeping, a brother in the church was sleeping with his father's wife. We wouldn't even stretch our minds to say what all of it would mean. But the part of the text that is of interest is this, that Paul writes that the church was proud of it. How could it be that a community of the people of God could come to a place where the entire congregation or a large part of the congregation would be proud that their freedom in Christ would allow them to have a brother sleeping with his father's wife, something that even the pagans would frown at. And yet it was being practiced, allowed to be practiced in the church. How could it be that they could have come to such a place where it was not only being practiced, it was not only approved, but the congregation is proud that they could allow this to happen? It seems to me that in the exercise of the privileges that we have as Christians, sometimes we run overboard. It seems that their newfound freedom in Christ caused them to think, to suppose that that freedom allowed them to practice immorality. It seems that having been taught some of the important principles of being in faith, of being in this new relationship with God, they now felt that for them, some things, as dastardly as it appears, were not only permissible, but everybody could applaud it. Thankfully, within the congregation, there were those who were concerned. And Paul was equally concerned, and Paul jumped at it at once. But it is still troubling that his sentence was on the man who was sleeping with his father's wife. And while he spoke generally to the congregation about yeast corrupting and so on, that the entire congregation was not itself brought under some disciplining for even holding such a view of freedom, for even holding such a view of what it means to be in Christ, of holding such a view that such a thing could be tolerated or even thought of as tolerable. And yet, in many ways, here in this space, sometimes we find ways of justifying some of the things we do. Here in this space, at this point in our experiences as Christians, we find ways of explaining to ourselves why we do what we do. Walking away from the safe and narrow, to explore some of the things that we think we can and find ways of justifying it because for some we're free in Christ.